A day after the Russian President Vladimir Putin, in a call with his American counterpart Donald Trump, has agreed to halt attacks against the Ukrainian energy targets. There's been a fresh round of Russian bombardment of targets in Ukraine. Explosions rang out and air raid sirens sounded over the capital city of Kiev, prompting the authorities to issue an advisory. About 145 drones and 6 missiles were fired overnight. Ukraine claims that Russia also carried out a drone attack on the electricity system powering the railways in central Ukraine. The parts of the railways have been left without any electricity, but railway traffic has not been affected. Now, Zelensky further said that there have been hits specifically on civilian infrastructure, including on a hospital in Sumy, adding that it is these types of nighttime attacks by Russia that will destroy the country's energy sector infrastructure and the normal life of the Ukrainians. Now, earlier, President Trump had hailed his 2-hour calls with Putin as good and productive, insisting that he has an understanding with Putin to quickly work towards a complete ceasefire and also a wider settlement to the 3-year-old war. Now, after last week's talks in Jeddah, the U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio had said that the ball was in Russia's court, as the Ukrainians accepted Washington's proposal for a full ceasefire. But the White House's statement following the Trump-Putin call made no reference to that agreement with Kiev. It just said that broader truce talks will begin immediately in West Asia. The Kremlin, in a statement, said that Putin and Trump had agreed on the Russian-Ukrainian prisoner exchange, with 175 to be freed by each side. Also, Russia will return 23 wounded Ukrainian soldiers as a goodwill gesture. A spokesperson for the British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said that the country will stand with Kiev for as long as it takes to ensure that Moscow can never launch an illegal invasion again. Now, France and Germany had a similar response. Speaking alongside with the French President Emmanuel Macron, the German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said that Ukraine can count on the United States and can count on Europe.
The first steps are being put in place, but the objective must remain the same: a ceasefire which is measurable and verifiable, fully respected. To launch full and detailed peace talks, which will enable a solid and long-lasting peace. That remains our objective, and this is not conceivable without the Ukrainians at the table.
All right, now to give us more insights in terms of what is, of course, happening in the Russia-Ukraine war, we are joined by Mr. Fred Weir, who is a journalist and also a political commentator. He's joining us live from Moscow. Mr. Weir, the fact that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, in fact, had a 2-hour-long phone call in which they discussed a number of different things, and they also, interestingly, agreed on a temporary halt on Russia attacking Ukraine's energy grid without a full ceasefire having been agreed upon. In your assessment, do you think this is a good starting point for something much more concrete? What in your assessment, does this Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin phone call means?
Well, it means that there is a process that's underway, and a lot of it probably isn't known yet. They're obviously agreeing on longer-term principle end points for the war, and they're not telling us what those are yet, but they are hinting at it, so we know that really substantive conversation is going on. Meanwhile, this partial ceasefire, which isn't in effect yet, that's why both sides launched major drone attacks on the other last night. They're just trying to get as much done before the ceasefire comes into effect, and that will presumably happen after meetings in Saudi Arabia on Sunday, coming Sunday. So at that point, it will be a de-escalation in effect. Hopefully, both sides will agree to it, and both sides will, honor the agreement, and it means the war will start to wind down. Putin clearly did not agree to a full ceasefire. Russia has said explicitly from the beginning that they don't consider a full ceasefire at this point in their interests, and they want more of that endgame decided upon and settled before they'll stop advancing. They're the ones who are going forward and apparently winning. So it isn't, they see it very clearly not in their interests to accept a ceasefire, a full ceasefire, until the end is in sight.
Right. It's interesting that you mentioned that for the Russians, a ceasefire is not in their interest. But for any negotiations to succeed, there needs to be a bit of give and take. Russia has some clear strategic objectives. In your assessment, when the talks take place on Sunday in Riyadh, what do you think the Russians would be willing to agree on? What is the Russian red line? And to what extent do you think Donald Trump would be willing to match Russia's red lines?
This is a lot of unknowns here, but certainly the Russian bottom line is they want a Ukraine that is neutral, that is no membership of NATO, and substantially demilitarized. And they want those 4 provinces that they have already under their own laws legally annexed to be ceded to Russia. Beyond that, there are probably a lot of smaller, lesser deals, lesser issues that Russia may be prepared to compromise on. Mm-hmm. But the basic one is no Ukraine in the Western sphere.
All right.
Ukraine, at best, has to be between the 2 worlds and neutral and defanged.
Now the 4 regions that we're talking about, Russia does not even completely control them. It completes large portions of them, but does not completely control them. Do you think if Donald Trump agrees to all of these conditions that Vladimir Putin is setting out, would it not be tantamount to Donald Trump literally surrendering Ukraine? But he also needs a face saver. What do you think is the face saver for the Americans and Donald Trump in these negotiations?
Well, I think Donald Trump needs to spin whatever the end is so that he looks like the guy who facilitated it, who made it happen. But the bottom line here, I think, is that the Russians, and they've probably expressed this to him, are advancing on the battlefield, and they will. They have the resources, they have the momentum, and they will continue until they get their basic requirements. So that's the thing that has yet to be finessed. Right. That's where there are probably very intensive sub-rosa conversations taking place, and we'll find out about it in due time.
All right. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Fred Weir, for joining us with that perspective there.
Thank you.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.